Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, history buffs and tennis aficionados, welcome back to Timeless Sagas. I'm your host, and today we're going to embark on an epic journey to explore the fascinating history of tennis, a sport that has captured the hearts of millions around the world. So, sit back, relax, and let's serve up some knowledge. Now, before we get into the modern, high-speed game that we all know and love, let's grab our time machines and venture back to 12th century France. That's right, folks, the origins of tennis can be traced back to the medieval era, where it was known as jeu de paume, or game of the palm. In fact, it wasn't even played with rackets at first. Instead, our courageous ancestors used their bare hands to smack a ball made of wool or leather, which was sometimes stuffed with sawdust, sand, or even human hair. Talk about a hairy situation. As the game gained popularity among the French nobility, it started to take on a more recognizable form. By the 13th century, players began using gloves with webbing between the fingers, an early prototype of the racket. And as the centuries rolled on, the gloves morphed into wooden paddles, followed by more sophisticated frames strung with gut, yes, gut, as in the intestines of animals. Yikes, right? But hey, they had to make do with the resources they had back then. Now, let's talk about the courts. Back in ye olde days, the game was played in monastery courtyards, where the walls formed natural boundaries. Players would smack the ball off the walls, giving rise to the term real tennis, a nod to the royal courts where the game was often played. Fun fact, King Louis X of France was such a fan of the sport that he actually had indoor courts built within his palaces. Talk about taking your hobby to the next level. But France wasn't the only country to fall in love with tennis. Our beloved sport soon spread across Europe, with courts popping up in England, Italy, and Spain. It was during this period that a certain English king, you might have heard of him, King Henry VIII, became a huge fan of the game. In fact, historians believe that Henry VIII was an accomplished player and had a court built at Hampton Court Palace in the early 16th century. Now, let's fast forward a couple of centuries to the Victorian era, a time of top hats, corsets, and the invention of the modern game of tennis. In 1874, a British Army officer named Major Walter Clopton Wingfield patented a new version of the game, which he called spheristike, a Greek term meaning skill in playing at ball. Thankfully, the name didn't stick, and it quickly became known as lawn tennis to differentiate it from the older, indoor version. Wingfield's game was played on an hourglass-shaped court, with a net that was higher at the sides than in the middle. The rackets were made of wood, and the balls were made of rubber, a far cry from the woolen and leather balls of yesteryear. Players would serve underhand, and the scoring system was somewhat similar to what we have today, with points awarded for each game won. The popularity of lawn tennis skyrocketed, and in 1877, the first Wimbledon championship was held, marking the beginning of the rich tradition of tennis tournaments that we know today. At first, the tournament was only open to amateur players, but by 1968, with the dawn of the Open era, professionals were allowed to compete, paving the way for the likes of Billie Jean King, Rod Laver, and Arthur Ashe to grace the courts of Wimbledon. Now, you might be wondering, what about the other Grand Slam tournaments? Well, the US Open was first held in 1881, initially as a men's-only event, with women's singles and doubles being added in 1887. The French Open, or Roland Garros, as it's known today, was established in 1891, but it wasn't until 1925 that the tournament opened its doors to international competitors. Last but not least, the Australian Open was founded in 1905, and like its counterparts, it has evolved over the years to become one of the most prestigious events in the tennis world. But it's not just the tournaments that have evolved, so too has the game itself. Over the years, we've seen the emergence of distinct playing styles, from the serve and volley approach of legends like Martina Navratilova and Pete Sampras to the powerful baseline game of Serena Williams and Rafael Nadal. The sport has also seen technological advancements, with the introduction of metal and graphite rackets, synthetic strings, and even electronic line calling systems like Hawkeye. Speaking of technology, we can't forget the role that media has played in shaping the sport. From radio broadcasts of Wimbledon in the 1920s to the advent of television coverage in the 1950s, tennis has always been a popular spectator sport. And with the rise of the internet and streaming services, fans can now follow their favorite players and tournaments from anywhere in the world. So, there you have it, folks, the rich and storied history of tennis, a game that has come a long way from its humble beginnings in medieval France. From kings and queens to modern-day champions, tennis has captured the hearts and minds of people across the globe. And as long as there are courts to play on and fans to cheer, the timeless saga of tennis will continue to unfold. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the ages. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more timeless sagas. Until next time, keep exploring the past and making history come alive.